My ex-husband's new wife posted on Facebook. Finally, he has a real woman who takes care of herself, unlike some people. I liked her post and commented just 3 simple words. The next day she deleted everything and blocked me immediately, but it was already way too late for what happened next in her so-called perfect life with him. I was at Target when I saw Brittany's post. Standing in the household goods aisle with dish soap in one hand and my phone in the other, reading her public declaration that my ex-husband finally had a real woman. The photo showed her in workout clothes, all angles and filtered light, tagged with the new restaurant location they were opening. Finally, he has a real woman who takes care of herself, unlike some people. I read it twice. Looked at the 47 likes. Recognized his mother's name, his business partner, the hostess from Location 2 who'd watched Brittany flirt with Derek while I was still his wife. I could have written paragraphs. Could have listed every unpaid hour I worked in those restaurants, every system I built, every crisis I managed while he took credit. That I liked her post. Left a comment with 3 words that looked like friendly agreement but would trigger the clause buried in my divorce settlement. Check the books. Then I called Derek's sister Jennifer and said it was time to destroy them both. Jennifer answered on the first ring. I saw the post. Did you see my comment? Check the books. She laughed, sharp and quick. You're actually doing it. The 4th location puts them over the threshold. My attorney confirmed it last week. I put the dish soap in my cart and moved toward the checkout. They hit 32% growth. The clause activates. Mom's going to lose her mind when she finds out Brittany's been cooking the numbers. We don't know that yet, I said, but we both did. Jennifer had suspected for months. Small things that didn't add up, employee complaints that got dismissed, profit margins that looked too good given the expansion costs. The audit will find whatever's there. When are you filing? Tomorrow morning. Settlement enforcement, business valuation dispute, request for forensic accounting. It'll take them completely by surprise. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. You know this is going to get ugly. It's been ugly since Derek brought her to Christmas dinner while our divorce was still being finalized. I got in line behind a woman with 2 screaming toddlers. I'm done being the one who stays quiet to keep the peace. Good. I'll start putting together my presentation for the board meeting. Once your audit request goes through, Dad will have to call an emergency session. That's when I hit them with everything. We hung up. I paid for my stuff, drove home to my apartment that was smaller than the house I'd lived in but entirely mine, and opened my laptop. The divorce settlement was saved in a folder labeled Legal Documents. I'd read it so many times I had sections memorized, but I went to page 47 anyway, subsection 12, paragraph 3. In the event that Morrison Family Restaurants, LLC experiences a valuation increase exceeding 30%, within 36 months of the finalization of this divorce decree, the plaintiff shall be entitled to compensation reflecting her 8 years of unpaid labor contribution to said business, calculated as 15% of growth value beyond the 30% threshold, with full rights to request independent forensic accounting to verify valuation claims. My attorney, Patricia Harmon, had fought for that clause like it was the only thing that mattered. Derek's lawyer had barely glanced at it. They were so focused on keeping me from getting part of his salary, so convinced the restaurants would stay stable at their current 3 locations, that they didn't see the trap. Patricia had looked at the business plan Derek stupidly left open on his laptop one night, saw the expansion timeline, and built the clause around what she knew was coming. They're going to grow, she told me in her office 9 months ago. Men like Derek always do. It's not about success, it's about ego. And when they do, you're going to own a piece of that growth because you earned it. I'd worked at Morrison Family Restaurants from the month Derek and I got married. His father, Richard Morrison, owned 2 locations when we met. Casual dining, locally famous, the kind of place that survived on reputation and regulars. Richard ran them like it was still 1985. Paper schedules, cash register systems that jammed, inventory tracked in spiral notebooks. The restaurants made money because the food was good and people were loyal, but they were hemorrhaging profit through inefficiency. I fixed it. Spent my evenings after my actual job building spreadsheets, researching POS systems, creating employee schedules that optimized coverage and minimized overtime. Introduced vendor management software that cut food costs by 18% in the first year. Trained managers on inventory systems that reduced waste. Richard loved me. Called me the daughter he never had. Derek took credit for every single improvement. My wife's been helping out with some of the administrative stuff, he'd say at family dinners, like I was filing papers and not rebuilding their entire operational structure. When they opened Location 3, I project managed the whole thing. Permits, contractors, equipment vendors, staffing. I did it while working full-time as an office manager at a dental practice, which was the job Derek thought was my real work. The restaurant job was just helping out family, which meant it was free. Richard paid Derek a salary of $90,000 a year to be operations director. Jennifer, who had an MBA from Chapel Hill and actually understood restaurant finance, made $65,000 as assistant manager and got excluded from every major decision. I made nothing and did the work that made expansion possible. Then Derek hired Brittany as a hostess at Location 2. She was 24, recently graduated from community college with some kind of hospitality certificate, all blonde highlights and practiced smiles. I watched him flirt with her for 3 months before I said anything. Watched her flirt back. When I finally confronted him, he told me I was insecure and jealous and maybe if I took better care of myself he wouldn't notice other women. 6 months later he moved out. Said he needed space to figure out what he wanted. I found out from his mother that he was living with Brittany 2 weeks after that. The divorce took 11 months because Richard kept trying to mediate, kept insisting we were just going through a rough patch, kept pretending his son hadn't blown up our marriage for someone barely old enough to rent a car. Patricia made sure the settlement reflected reality, even if Richard's family never would. The notification on my phone pulled me back. Brittany had deleted her post. I checked the timestamp. 6 hours after my comment. I opened Facebook and confirmed. The whole thing was gone. Her profile was suddenly private. She'd blocked me. Too late. I already had screenshots. So did Jennifer. So did 3 other people I'd quietly stayed friendly with who understood exactly what Brittany's post was really saying. I sent the screenshots to Patricia with a message. Filing the valuation claim tomorrow. She just made it personal. Patricia responded in minutes. Already drafted. I'll have it filed by 10. How aggressive do you want the accounting request? Full forensic. Every transaction for the past 3 years. That's going to be expensive. I have the money. The divorce settlement had been decent on the asset split once Patricia proved how much unpaid work I'd done. I'd walked away with enough to live comfortably while I figured out what came next. Spending some of it to audit Derek's precious family business felt like an excellent investment. I'll include a request for expedited processing. Given the settlement terms, we should get approval fast. I spent the rest of the evening going through old files. Every email I'd sent about restaurant operations. Every spreadsheet I'd built. Every vendor contract I'd negotiated. I had documentation of 8 years of work, thousands of hours of unpaid labor, all organized in folders on my laptop because I'd always been the one who kept records. Derek used to make fun of me for it. You keep everything, he'd say, watching me file emails. It's just restaurant stuff, not the nuclear codes. Turns out documentation matters when you're proving your case in court. Patricia had loved my files. Built the entire unpaid labor argument around them. The next morning I was drinking coffee when my phone rang. Patricia. It's filed. Court accepted the expedited request. They're assigning a forensic accountant by end of week. That fast. The settlement clause is airtight and you have documentation of your work. Judge took one look and approved it. Derek's going to get notification today. Good. Meredith, you need to prepare for this to get nasty. Richard's going to try to protect the business. Derek's going to claim you're being vindictive. Brittany's going to make herself the victim. Let them. I went to work, answered phones at the dental office, scheduled cleanings and root canals, and did not check my phone until lunch. When I did, I had 7 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize and 3 voicemails. I listened to the first one. Derek's voice, tight with anger. What the hell are you doing? My lawyer just called about some audit. You can't do this. The settlement is done. You need to call this off right now. Deleted. Second voicemail. Meredith, this is Richard Morrison. I'm very disappointed. I thought we ended things on good terms. This audit is going to hurt the family business and I know you don't really want that. Please call me so we can discuss this reasonably. The same Richard who'd chosen his son over acknowledging what Derek did. The same Richard who'd brought Brittany to the settlement negotiation and introduced her as Derek's fiancée before my divorce was even final. Reasonable. Deleted. Third voicemail. Brittany. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but it's not going to work. Derek told me about your clause and there's nothing wrong with our books. You're just bitter because he's happy now. Grow up. I saved that one. Sent it to Patricia with a note. New wife now involved in business defense. Interesting. Patricia called immediately. That's a gift. She just admitted she has access to financial information. When the audit finds problems, we can establish she knew. You think the audit will find problems? Meredith. A 26-year-old with a hospitality certificate has been running marketing for a business that expanded 3 locations in 2 years. The profit margins they reported last quarter were exceptional. Almost too exceptional. Patricia paused. Jennifer sent me some preliminary concerns yesterday. Employee complaints about profit-sharing distributions. Vendor contracts that don't match purchase orders. Small things, but they form a pattern. What kind of pattern? The kind that suggests someone's been creative with the accounting. The forensic accountant was a woman named Linda Thornton. She had gray hair cut short, glasses on a chain, and the energy of someone who'd seen every financial trick in the book and was mildly annoyed by all of them. She met with me and Patricia the following week in Patricia's office. I've reviewed the initial documents, Linda said, spreading folders across the conference table. The business valuation is definitely over your threshold. Closer to 38% growth, actually. You're entitled to compensation. But. I heard it in her voice. But some of the numbers don't reconcile. Your settlement requires me to verify the valuation, which means auditing their financials. I've found discrepancies in the marketing budget, the vendor payments, and the profit-sharing distributions to employees. How bad? Linda looked at Patricia, then at me. Bad enough that I'm legally obligated to report it if I confirm what I suspect. We're not talking about sloppy bookkeeping. This looks intentional. Embezzlement. Potentially. Someone's been creating fake vendor accounts and paying invoices to companies that don't exist. The money gets deposited in accounts I'm still tracing, but it's not going to Morrison Family Restaurants operations. Linda pulled out a spreadsheet. It started small about 18 months ago. 500 here, 1,000 there. But it escalated. In the last 6 months, we're looking at about $60,000 redirected. I did the math in my head. 18 months ago. Right when Brittany got promoted from hostess to marketing director. Right when Derek gave her access to the vendor payment system. Can you prove who did it? I can prove who approved the payments. Every fake invoice has an approval signature. Digital but traceable. Linda tapped the spreadsheet. Brittany Crawford. Your ex-husband's current wife. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Well, this just became a criminal matter. The audit took 3 more weeks. Linda was meticulous, tracking every suspicious payment, cross-referencing vendor registrations, documenting the fake companies Brittany had created. Shell corporations registered to P.O. boxes, bank accounts in Brittany's maiden name, invoices for marketing services that were never performed. Jennifer started going to the restaurant locations quietly, talking to employees, gathering complaints, documenting the profit-sharing issues. Turned out Brittany had been skimming from the employee profit pool too, redirecting funds into her marketing budget where she could then siphon them into her fake vendor accounts. The employees were furious when Jennifer explained what was happening. These were people who'd worked for Morrison Family Restaurants for years, who'd been promised profit sharing as part of their compensation, who'd watched their quarterly checks shrink while Brittany posted on social media about the business success she was generating. She told us the profit sharing was down because of expansion costs, one of the assistant managers said. Jennifer recorded the conversation. Said we had to sacrifice now for growth later. Meanwhile, she's driving a new Audi and taking trips to Miami. Richard Morrison called the emergency board meeting for a Tuesday in late April. The board consisted of Richard, Derek, Jennifer, and Richard's brother Thomas, who mostly stayed out of operations. 4 votes on any major business decision. Patricia and Linda attended as my representatives. I wasn't technically invited, but the settlement clause gave me the right to present findings related to business valuation. Richard couldn't exclude me without violating the court order. I wore the navy suit I'd bought for job interviews I hadn't needed yet. Walked into the meeting room at Location 1, the original restaurant, where I'd spent hundreds of hours building systems and solving problems. Derek was already there, sitting next to his father. He looked thinner than I remembered, stressed. Brittany sat behind him, not at the table but close enough to matter. She glared at me when I walked in. Jennifer sat across from Derek. She had her laptop open, files stacked beside her. Thomas sat at the end of the table looking confused about why he'd been summoned. Richard called the meeting to order. We're here to address Meredith's settlement claim and the subsequent audit. I want to resolve this quickly and professionally. He looked at me. Meredith, I hope you understand this audit has been disruptive to our operations. I understand the audit found significant problems with your operations, I said. Linda opened her briefcase. Mr. Morrison, I'm Linda Thornton, the forensic accountant hired to verify business valuation for settlement purposes. I've completed my analysis. She distributed copies of her report. The business has indeed experienced 38% growth, entitling Ms. Patterson to compensation under her settlement terms. However, during the verification process, I discovered evidence of financial fraud. Derek's head snapped up. What? Over the past 18 months, approximately $147,000 has been diverted from Morrison family restaurants through fake vendor accounts and fraudulent invoicing. The payments were approved by your marketing director, Brittany Crawford. Brittany stood up. That's insane. I approved legitimate vendor payments. This is clearly a setup because she, pointing at me, can't handle that. Derek moved on. Linda didn't even look at her. I have documentation of shell corporations registered to your maiden name. Bank records showing deposits matching the fraudulent invoice amounts. Email chains where you created false paper trails for services never rendered. She slid another document across the table. You also diverted $62,000 from employee profit-sharing funds into your marketing budget before siphoning it to your personal accounts. The room went silent. Richard was staring at the report like it was written in a foreign language. Thomas was reading with his mouth slightly open. Derek was looking at Brittany, something dawning in his expression. Jennifer spoke for the first time. I've also been conducting internal review at Dad's request. She hadn't, but Richard didn't correct her. I have written complaints from 14 employees about profit-sharing discrepancies. They were told expansion costs reduced their distributions. That was a lie. Brittany stole their money. I didn't steal anything. Brittany's voice was shaking now, the confidence cracking. Those were legitimate business expenses. Marketing consulting, social media management, brand development. From companies that don't exist, Linda said. Registered to addresses that are P.O. boxes. With bank accounts in your name. Derek finally spoke. Brittany, what is she talking about? It's a misunderstanding. I can explain the payments. Your ex-wife is twisting everything because she wants to destroy us. I want compensation for my unpaid labor, I said quietly. The embezzlement is just what the audit found along the way. Richard looked at his son. Did you know about this? Of course not. Dad, I would never. Brittany handles the marketing budget, but I review everything. I would have noticed. You approved several of the invoices yourself, Linda said, checking her notes. Not the majority, but enough to establish knowledge. Whether you knew they were fraudulent is a different question. The meeting deteriorated from there. Brittany insisted it was all a misunderstanding, that she could provide documentation, that I was orchestrating a vendetta. Derek kept saying he had no idea, that he trusted Brittany to handle her department, that obviously something went wrong but it wasn't intentional. Richard looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Jennifer let them spiral for 20 minutes before she made her move. Dad, we need to address the criminal aspect. This isn't just bad bookkeeping. Fraud. We have to report it. We're not calling the police on family, Richard said. Brittany isn't family, Jennifer said. And if we don't report it, we become complicit. The employees whose money she stole deserve justice. Our business reputation is at stake. Thomas, who'd been silent, finally spoke. Jennifer's right. If this gets out and we covered it up, we're finished. Every vendor, every supplier, every employee is going to wonder what else we're hiding. It won't get out if we handle it internally, Derek said. We can fire Brittany, pay back the money, restructure the systems. With what money? Jennifer pulled out another document. We're leveraged for the fourth location. The cash flow problems we've been having? This is why. She's been bleeding us dry while making the numbers look good enough to justify expansion we couldn't actually afford. Richard looked at the report again. How bad is it? Bad enough that without immediate capital infusion, we're going to start missing vendor payments in about 6 weeks, Jennifer said. The growth was fake. Brittany was cooking the books to hide the theft and make herself look successful. We're about to collapse. Derek turned to Brittany. Tell me this isn't true. She didn't answer. Just gathered her purse and walked out. The door slammed behind her. The silence that followed was profound. Richard looked at me, and for the first time I saw something like recognition. You knew. I knew the growth numbers looked unsustainable. I suspected the books were wrong. The audit proved it. And you decided to destroy us. I decided to get what I was legally owed. What happened after that was your son's choice in who to trust. Patricia stood. Mr. Morrison, you have 3 options. Report the fraud to the police and cooperate with investigation. Attempt to handle it privately and face potential conspiracy charges when it inevitably comes out. Or pay Ms. Patterson her settlement claim immediately, along with damages for the time and expense of uncovering fraud you should have caught yourself, and let her decide whether to report. That's extortion. That's business. You hired a thief. You gave her access to your finances. You're liable for what she did. Ms. Patterson is offering you a chance to make this right before it becomes public. Richard looked at Derek. This is your mess. Dad, I didn't know. How could I have known? Because you were thinking with the wrong part of your anatomy instead of using your brain. Just like always. Richard stood. Board will vote on terminating Brittany Crawford effective immediately. Jennifer, you're now operations director. Derek, you're on leave pending investigation of your involvement. You can't be serious. You brought a criminal into my business and gave her the keys to the finances. I'm deadly serious. Richard looked at me. Your settlement claim will be paid in full within 30 days. I assume that resolves your interest in our internal matters. Not quite, I said. I'm also filing a separate claim for the employees whose profit sharing was stolen. They're entitled to restitution. That's not your concern. It is if you want me to stay quiet about how long this went on while I was still married to your son and working here unpaid. How many people need to know that Derek's new wife was embezzling while you were all telling me I should be grateful for the opportunity to help family? Richard's jaw tightened. The employees will be compensated fully. You have my word. The board voted. Brittany was terminated. Derek was suspended. Jennifer was promoted. And I was owed $230,000 paid within the month. Brittany was arrested 6 weeks later. Turned out when I filed my own police report about the embezzlement, providing Linda's full audit as evidence, the DA got very interested. Especially when the employee complaints came in. Especially when they discovered she'd also been filing fraudulent tax documents to hide the stolen money. Derek tried to claim he was a victim too. That Brittany had manipulated him, that he had no idea. The DA didn't buy it. He wasn't charged criminally, but the civil suits from the employees named him as a defendant. Richard settled those too, quietly paying out of his personal funds to protect the business. The fourth location never opened. Morrison Family Restaurants restructured, brought in outside management and slowly recovered. Jennifer ran it with the efficiency and intelligence she should have been allowed to use from the beginning. Richard retired a year later. Sold his majority stake to a regional restaurant group and split the proceeds between Jennifer and Thomas. Derek got nothing. The marriage to Brittany imploded before the trial, dissolved in restraining orders and accusations. Last I heard, he was managing a corporate chain restaurant in Charlotte, living in a 1-bedroom apartment, and paying child support to a girlfriend who left when the money dried up. Brittany served 18 months. Got out on good behavior. Last I saw, works at a call center and isn't allowed to handle money in any professional capacity. I took my settlement money and bought a small cafe in Asheville. Nothing fancy, just good coffee and pastries and a quiet space. I hired well, paid fairly, and built something that was entirely mine. Jennifer comes to visit sometimes. We laugh about the fact that my 3-word Facebook comment triggered the destruction of everything Derek thought he'd built. Check the books, she said last time she was here, shaking her head. That's all it took. That's all it ever takes, I said. People who steal always leave trails. You just have to know when to look. The cafe is doing well. Better than well. I might open a second location next year, but only if the numbers actually support it. Only if I build it the right way. I never did respond to Brittany's post with anything else. Didn't need to. Those 3 words did exactly what I intended. Made her paranoid enough to spiral, confident enough to think she was untouchable, and visible enough that when everything fell apart, everyone knew why. Sometimes revenge isn't about burning it all down yourself. Sometimes it's about lighting a match and watching them realize they built everything on gasoline. If this story of patient, calculated justice made your heart race, hit that like button right now. Subscribe for more tales of people who played the long game and won completely. Sometimes the quietest move destroys the loudest enemy. Sometimes 3 words are enough to burn down an empire built on lies. That satisfaction you're feeling? There's more where that came from.